yes, you're supposed to think for yourself and so on, but a lot of these answers are fairly set answers. So that's what I mean. Learn the basics first. Then you can bring in some of your stuff, which I do like, but the examiner may not credit me for that. Right? They have a marking scheme. Students say, what if I say something not on the marking scheme? You're not really supposed to, because a lot of the stuff will be in your textbook. Your little student unit games, that you want to learn back to front. Every argument in that is what you want to repeat in your exam in June. Okay? So don't be happy with that advice, Kathy?
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah, really? Right? So the title you have to take, it's not about globalization, it was about the UK. Malaga, make sure you do them on time. I'm not going to mark it after this link. Right? Okay, so let's go to what happened yesterday.
George Osborne? Just a reminder, if anybody does actually want to have a look at it, I never did, but you can download it and you have the entire budget statement. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that's what the thing looks like. 100 pages plus, I'm not sure how many there is, but detail by detail everything that's done there. Right? So budget report, the economy and public finances, the questions that we're doing. Growth, fairness. So two things: having economic growth, creating fairness as well within the economy. We just see what some of the main features. So anybody, what were the main stuff from yesterday? Well, here's Ed Balls. Let's see what his criticism.
If this is success, I'd hate to see what their failure would look like, because on every measure, compared to what they said they were going to do, they've utterly failed. The economy is flatlined for 2 years. They've downgraded their forecast for growth. Borrowing is not coming down, it's stalled. They've borrowed £245 billion more than they planned. Families are worse off last year, this year, next year. Businesses aren't investing. This plan is just not working. And I've been saying 2 years, Louise, to the Chancellor, you've got to do something real to get some growth back, to get some confidence back, build some houses, cut taxes for families, support business, because without growth, we can't get the deficit down.
And they would argue,
that's where we are.
They would argue that they are planning £3 billion a year boost to infrastructure, a cut in corporation tax, and help with national insurance contributions for small businesses, all measures designed to do exactly what you want them to do.
What they're doing is small beer, to be honest, and small beer literally, because a 1p off a pint of beer, got to drink a lot of pints of beer for that to make any difference at all. Cutting corporation tax isn't going to work if companies aren't investing and making profits because they're so lacking in confidence. And what they're doing in a couple of weeks' time is they're raising taxes for pensioners and they're raising taxes for families with tax credits and only cutting taxes for millionaires, people earning over £150,000. It's the wrong priorities and it's not working.
Well, what I want to talk to you really is about your alternative. So you say, let's talk about that 50p tax rate. You say now that you would restore it.
Yes. Okay. Right now, I think the idea that a tax cut only for the richest people, but everybody else is paying more tax and is worse off this year and next year, I think it's completely perverse, totally unfair, and the wrong priorities. To be honest, I think George Osborne should have done a U-turn on that yesterday. It's so foolish to plough on.
So let's be clear. So you say right now that is what you do. Let's forward wind a bit in our imaginations. If you won the election, what would you do?
Well, if we had an election in 3 weeks' time, we would be not going ahead with the top rate of tax cut, and we would be putting money back for working families in their tax credits. We would be introducing a mansion tax to cut taxes for families. What I can't do on your programme is start to say in 2 years' time what commitments I'll make on tax, because to be honest, we don't know where we're going to be in a couple of months' time, given the state of the economy is so bad.
Forgive me, but either you think that it's the tax that's wrong, or it's not. So which is it?
Well, I'm not going to come on BBC Breakfast and announce Labour's budget 2.5 years ahead. That would be irresponsible. I'm not going to make promises I can't keep. I'm not going to break promises in the way that others have done in this Parliament. But right now, it's the clearest answer, I think, is the wrong choice economically and on fairness grounds, and it should be reversed. The Chancellor should do it right now.
Okay, I mean, what I'm trying to get from you, because this is what people want to know, at home want to know, what is your alternative? So what would you change from yesterday then?
Well, right now, I think the national insurance cut for small business is a good thing. I'm quite happy about what he's done on beer, but it's small beer, as I said. I think what he's doing around support for first-time buyers on mortgages, we need to look at the details of that. Help is a good thing, although at the moment he's talking about this being potentially for second homes, £600,000, a real kind of risk for the taxpayer on the balance sheet. But that won't work unless you actually build homes to get the housing market working, to get prices coming down, not going up for families, and he's not doing the house building. So a house building programme he needs. I would do a temporary VAT cut right now, cut VAT on repairs and maintenance to 5%, bring forward some more infrastructure, support business, support families. The families are going to be worse off next year. Worse off families, business is not investing, that's not going to get growth or the deficit moving.
Let's talk about the investment in infrastructure, because in order to do that, I presume you are talking about increasing spending, which means increasing borrowing. Where is the evidence that you can borrow your way out of trouble?
Well, the problem we've had in the last 2 years is the Chancellor said his policy of cutting spending, raising taxes quickly, much quicker than we planned, he said that would work. He'd secure the recovery, get the deficit down, keep the AAA rating. As we've discussed before, the economy's flatlined, the deficit is up, he's lost the AAA rating. On every ground, it's completely failed. I want to get the deficit down credibly over the coming years, but if you don't have growth in the economy, if you choke off the recovery, then it turns out not to work, as we've seen in the last couple of years. If he'd listened to me 2 years ago and gone for a more balanced plan, in my view, the deficit would be coming down now. He's the guy who's borrowing huge amounts more because of failure. Why borrow for failure when you can actually invest now in houses and for families, for business, get growth and get the deficit down? That's a much more sensible approach. Don't borrow for failure, borrow to invest to get the deficit down.
Okay. This is what politicians are. He spoke non-stop for about 5 minutes. And virtually everything was criticism. Now, the good thing for us is that some of the points that he said will be the points that you can use for evaluation. Right? So that's what criticism means. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to put up the key points on a board. See the shadow chancellor.
He's a Labour.
So let's look at the key points, and then I want you to explain to me, the implications. So, Catherine.
So it's like two more, sorry.
Okay, so fuel, alcohol, and cigarettes. Alcohol and cigarettes, Monica, what type of goods are they? Demerits. What normally happens in alcohol?
Blossom.
So the Chancellor's put up tax duty. Okay, what's the difference between duty and VAT? Let's be clear. Two different types of taxes. What is the current level of VAT? 20%. George Osborne put it up from 17.5. The previous lesson I said to you, one question you may get is, what is the impact of a shift of taxation away from direct to indirect? Right? Remember Mrs. Thatcher in 1979? She reduced direct taxes. Standard rate, 33% down to 25. The top rate, 83 down to 60. Right? And then subsequently to 40. And VAT, I remember back in the 80s, was, I think, 7.5%. then it went up to 10, 12 and a half, 15, so they gradually put it up. What a duty escalator is, now what's an escalator do when you're on the underground, when you ride an escalator, what are you doing? You're going up. Okay, so automatically, you stand on it and it automatically takes you up. So what a duty escalator is something which automatically happens. Every year, duty on a pint of beer or a bottle of wine will automatically go up by slightly above than the rate of inflation. Right? What he has said, he's going to scrap that. So again, especially on fuel, that was going to push up cost of production for businesses. So fuel normally gets hit with duty. He goes, I'm not going to put up the price of a litre of petrol. Right? So a little bit positive there. National income tax, the limit is going to be raised to £10,000. So remember, do you start to pay tax straight away on your income?
No, it's the first 10,000.
Right? You have what's called a tax-free allowance, right? And that is going to be raised to £10,000. So everybody in this country who's working is not going to pay tax on the first £10,000. £20,000 tax ban will start on £10,001, right? So tax-free. Why do you think he did that?
So that people don't just sit with unemployment benefits and try to get...
No, these are people in work. So if everybody in work now, if you have a bigger tax-free allowance, what's the... So you keep more of your money, what happens to your disposable income? More disposable income. You're going to spend that. Okay, so that's the thing. Theoretically, disposable income goes up, C goes up, AB goes up. That's the idea there. Okay. Now, housing was interesting. To build houses, Cassie, what does that come under?
Structural.
It's
Infrastructure.
Infrastructure. What type of infrastructure?
Residential.
Yeah, okay, social. Okay, so social infrastructure would be houses, roads, railways, schools, hospitals. That is a big scheme now. So, Catherine, what would be the advantage of building so many houses?
You can encourage people to buy houses for the first
When
time.
houses are being built,
Well,
why is that important for the economy?
Well, the builders and people become more employed.
Okay, more
And so
employment.
you reduce the unemployment, and then, yeah.
So it's a big, big injection into the economy. Construction, significant part of the economy or not?
Yeah.
It's very significant. Almost 7% of GDP comes from the construction industry, right? So it is important. Let's get the houses being built. Ed Ball said something important though. He goes, what the Chancellor has said, if you're a first-time buyer, now you only need to put down 5% of the deposit of the house. The government will put down 20%, right? So that's helping people to afford a house now. Before, you had to raise a deposit yourself, right? And the average person in this country, let's say the average house is £250,000. Even a 10% deposit, £25,000, if you leave university at 21 years old, you don't have, not even, let's say you're an average person in this country, you start working at 18 years old, how many years will it take you to save £25,000?
20 years.
Yeah, it's going to take 20 years. In the old days, it took 10 years. Most people bought their housing in the late 20s. Now, people can only afford to buy it in the late 30s because that's when they can accumulate saving by themselves, unless your parents help you. And that's the way out. Right? I mean, I was lucky my parents did. And so that was 20 years ago. So I feel sorry for a lot of the people now. How on earth are my colleagues going to get this money? It's just impossible. Right? So the government does help out. What Ed Ball said, well, it's no point you promising I will give you 20% to buy a new built house if you're not building any new houses. So you have to put your money, start these house building. Let's have the houses. Don't just talk about what I'll do. Where are these houses? Currently, there's 96,000 houses being built a year in the country, when the need is for about 260,000. Right? So we're way short. And somebody estimated we need another 3 million houses in this
In the
country.
countryside getting a green.
Yeah? And the reason it hasn't done before is because of planning permission, greenfield sites, they're all protected. And I think there are going to be big, big changes. They're going to allow massive building in rural areas. There's going to be a big outcry for it, possibly. All right, so that's that one. At the state of the economy, the growth forecast, the Chancellor expected 1.2%. That has been halved to 0.6%. So what problem does that cause in that? The growth forecast is less.
Since it's low growth, there's going to be
Shows his policies from
Why don't
before.
I-
aren't working.
No, why not? So the growth forecast is low. How will that affect the Chancellor now?
Because that means that the Chancellor is going to have to inject more money into the economy to push it up.
And so
Yeah,
therefore he may
borrow
have
more.
to do what? He may have to borrow more.
more, and that could cause financial crowding out, because
Okay.
after that, you know, you could borrow money to spend money, and then
All right.
it could cause...
So he may have to borrow more. He may have to borrow more because if the economy slows down, what will automatically happen to T? Tax revenue. If the economy slows down, goes down. What will automatically happen to G? It will go up, and he may have no choice but to borrow money now, right? And what's his aim? To borrow
Yes.
less,
Well,
right? And that's a criticism. You said you want to borrow less. So discretionary policy, you deliberately cut government spending, right? You deliberately raise VAT. That is discretionary policy aimed at reducing this thing called the budget deficit. What you have done is choked off recovery, and automatically outside of your control, this has happened and you're going to have to borrow more. So you basically, your own policy has failed at you, right? So that's what Ed Ball was trying to say there, right? A lot of people are actually annoyed now, even in the city. They're saying, you know, we have to have some growth measures. Housing is the idea to get growth started. Kick up, you know, stimulate the construction, right? Okay, so that's a problem there. And the other thing I want you to be aware of, a good evaluation point, if your forecast is out even 0.5% on what you expect growth to be, and therefore what you expect tax revenue and government spending to be, if you're out just by a little bit, it is going to mess you up, because how much does the government spend in a year? How much is it going to spend this year in total? How much? Do you think the government's going to spend 100 billion this year?
It should spend
No.
over 10 billion.
There's like
The government in 1 year...
3 billion.
3 billion.
I don't know. Trillion.
121.
Last year it was
pounds.
680 billion pounds. That's how
I
much
said that they borrowed 247.
they borrowed. Well, we're going to come to the borrowing soon, next. Last year the government spent 680 billion pounds, right? Out of which 190 billion was on social protection, over 100 billion on health, 80 billion on education, right? The worst one was debt repayment, something like 50 to 60 billion. Right? So make sure you know the ballpark figures for all of these situations. Government borrowing now, he's expected to borrow 121 billion this year, 120 next year. I haven't shown you the video of him, but he basically said, when I came into power, Alistair Darling had borrowed 170 billion pounds the previous year. My borrowing is a third down. So he borrowed 120 billion as opposed to 170. That's where that figure comes from. I'm borrowing a third less. The problem though is he's going to have to borrow for a lot longer. He was thinking, well, I only need to borrow this much to maybe 2015-16. It's going to go up to 2018. Right? So that has gone up. Look at our debt. So his deficit is 7.4%. So GDP, his borrowing is 7.4% of GDP. What's it supposed to be, maximum? 3%. Yeah, there's all these rules, especially for Europe. Your government borrowing must be about 3% of GDP. His borrowing is 7.4%. Okay? Prior to 2008, our debt as a share of GDP, so our national debt was 40% of our GDP. Now it's going to go above 85%. Right? So within 5 years, national debt has doubled. In other words, Alistair Darling and George Osborne have borrowed in 5 years what the country had previously borrowed for the previous 300 years. Right? So just imagine, this is a massive scale of borrowing that's happened, all because of this banking crisis. Right? Okay, so... Oh my God! I'm really upset now. I think we should go to this. Forget the budget. This is important. Girls allowing us splitting. Oh no. Oh dear me. That's about right. Okay, spending and pay. Malika, over to you. Spending on government departments is going to fall. What type of expenditure is that? Most government departments, spending is going to fall. What type of spending is that? I'll give you a clue. Current or capital? Why is it current? All right. Is everybody happy? Is that current spending, yes?
That's current.
Current spending
It's in the
is,
short term. Like,
no,
we're not
current
sure.
spending is simply the spending on the public
Wages.
sector.
Like,
Wages,
Yeah.
of doctors,
So I mean by
nurses.
short, I mean like it's just like
No.
any. But like then you say the capital spending is the ones which are big fixed infrastructure like
But-
houses and like.
All right, but current spending is the public sector running, the cost of running the public sector, right? Current spending going to be cut, but where is he going to spend the money? What did he promise?
Capital?
£3 billion of capital spending. Now, we're going to criticise that in a bit, because we'll come to that. Jobs, 600,000 more jobs expected to be created, so employment should go up, unemployment should fall. There we go. An extra 15 billion for new road, rail and construction projects by 2020. This is what really irritates me. Starting with 3 billion in 2015. Can anybody criticise that?
3 billion.
Elections will be. So he might be out by the time that
Well,
starts.
first of all, when's he going to start that 3 billion?
2015.
2015. So what's the problem with that?
2 years
It's
from
2
now.
years time. Why is he not doing it now? Why 2015? Right? We need road building, railway building now, not in 2 years' time. Credit to Alistair Darley. Crossrail was going to be started 2012, right? And he put it forward to 2008. He just put it forward. He goes, let's start spending on Crossrail. Right? So that is evaluation. That
The time delay.
the time delay, 2015. If you want to do it, why don't you do it now? And then, right? So that's a big criticism, and that's what Alistair Darling, Ed Ball picked up on. He goes, "You're promising spending on infrastructure, but it's in 2 years' time. What about today?" Corporation tax is interesting. UK is one of the lowest corporation taxes. You had a question on that, on public finances. He wants to cut it further to 20%. Why is that a good thing, cutting corporation tax?
Encourages companies to have more money to spend, so they might employ
Why do they have more
people,
money to spend?
because they're spending less on tax.
So they retain more,
Retain more profits, they can hire more people, invest in that.
Alright. and they can invest. Now, for everybody for June, this is a very good evaluation for firms and investment. Right now, British firms are sitting on massive amounts of profit. Right? There's Ernst & Young is a big auditor and a consultancy firm, and there's a British company that's sitting on a mountain of profits and money. They're not investing. Why not?
For
Low confidence. That's it. They don't have confidence. They go, there's nothing there. So they're actually sitting on record levels of profits. It's all there. It's on their profit and loss accounts, on their balance sheets. They're not doing it because of confidence. And make sure you mention how powerful confidence is. Okay? We have one more. There was something on national insurance. This thing here. National insurance. I didn't realise how much national insurance firms pay. Now, in my income, my national insurance contribution, we pay 12%. Right? What national? So that is that 12% is taken out of my salary. What is that used for? Is a state pension. So when I retire, that is going to be used for my state pension. Right? And if I'm sick, that's where sick pay comes from. Right? So that's what this national insurance is. You pay that on top of your income tax. So the average person in the UK will pay 20% income tax plus 12% national insurance. Right? So that's 32%. 1/3 of your income is taxed. Right?
But
When I asked
most of it
James, how much do you pay for a company to hire a worker? They also have to pay national insurance contribution, a tax to the government. That is 13%. Right? So when the Chancellor said, I'm going to cut national insurance for firms by £2,000, he's basically saying to them, you don't have to pay 13% of your employee's salary as national income. Right? So you can pay less. So that's going to lower their costs as well. Now just imagine you're a firm, you hire somebody, you have to pay the government national insurance contribution. It's a tax for hiring someone. Right? Tax relief for investment in social enterprises. Social enterprise would be something for society, maybe a charity, something to help out society. Right? So energy and environment, tax allowances for investment in shale gas. Anybody heard of shale gas?
Mm-hmm.
What is shale gas?
The company? No?
No. It is gas. So remember in the North Sea, we discovered North Sea oil and gas.
Oh yeah, it's a type of gas.
This is a gas which is mixed in with shale, which is sand and stones and all sorts of stuff. And there's a lot of it under the ground. The problem is they have to separate the
And
gas
refine
from
it.
the shale, right? And that's a very costly
To build
energy.
refineries over.
Yeah.
So they can go.
But we have a lot of gas apparently under the UK land. So, and America has gone into shale gas big time, right? So they got so much there.
You put it into LPG, like liquid
Yeah.
Wait, is
petroleum
it just
gas as well.
in the North Sea?
Not in North Sea, it's underground.
Underground?
Underground,
Underground gas.
And then, so why is the US, do they have it as well?
They've got a
Or they
lot of shale
invested
gas,
it?
yeah. No?
Okay.
Underground, they have lots of it.
And oil.
Normally what you tend to find is the gas is trapped in a big sort of bubble. And that's where the gas fields are. They tap
They
into
drill
these
into
bubbles, right? And those bubbles have gas and oil in them. Now that it's mixed up with stuff, but there's a lot there.
Minecraft.
Yeah.
Again, something very significant.
Inflation.
Bank of England target is to stay at 2%. Some economists said rate it to 3%, right? But he's keeping it to 2%. Again, essentially, he's still a monetarist, right? So he still believes in tight control over inflation. But the bank remit, I'm going to change the focus. I don't just want you to control inflation. I want you to think about growth as well. So, why has he said that to the bank now? So what will the Bank of England do now then, if they got this remit? They have to focus on inflation and growth.
They let inflation go a bit higher if it's like helping to the growth.
Yeah. In other words, the Bank of England will say, be a bit more flexible. That
It will cut the interest rates a bit more.
we know we got inflation, and ordinarily we would increase interest rates to control it. But because we also have to bear in mind economic growth, perhaps we will not put up interest rates as much, or we'll just leave them unchanged, and we'll live with a little bit extra inflation. So that should be done like
to 3 then.
yeah, that should have been done. A lot of economists have also said the Bank of England should include in that not in the CPI good, but they should look at what is happening to asset price bubbles, right? What is happening to the housing market? What is happening to the stock market? If they think bubbles are being created, they should do something to prevent the bubbles from being created, right? Which is what they did not do up until 2008, neither here nor in America, because no chancellor wanted to say to the British people, I need to clamp down on this bubble, right? Because then it's like it being a party.
Property bubble.
Yeah, property. It's like, there's a party going on and you're the one who says, like, let's stop the party, stop the music, because of reality, right? Okay, pensioners, a little bit there, £144 a week, that is your state pension in this country. So all the elderly people here who don't have a private pension, living on about £600 a month, obviously not a lot, especially if you bear in mind gas and electricity bills are a few £100s.
Yeah, but they don't pay for rent.
Yeah, obviously no rent, but that's not a lot. Tax relief for family with children, there was a lot on there. So it was there, okay? So make sure you do have a look at this, don't just not look at it. You've got, BBC's done quite a bit, features and analysis, the main measures, who has lost most from the austerity, radical options. What do some radical economists think should happen to get out of that? So we might look at that later, because that would be interesting. What other ideas are there?
Communism.
No.
I might just bring it out.
No, actually, let's see.
I would just have to something like I just wanted to practice something like
Let's just quickly look at this, and then we'll go back to our macro. I'm just curious about this. What are
Could be
these
no immigrants through with BNP.
radical options?
No more immigrants. There's no more black people or any Indians.
What do you mean you don't pay rent?
Now, if you're a pensioner, but chances are you paid off your mortgage, and so you own your house.
So most of the people do own a house.
A lot of elderly people, the ones that don't, if you're in a council house, for example, during your life as a pensioner, you probably don't pay much. Or that'll get paid for you. Okay. We are currently in the longest depression, with the economy failing to recover to its previous peak level of output since before the 1920s.
Isn't this ever?
This is bad. This has been like 5 years already, and we've had, it just sort of it hasn't done it. That has not gone back
Because
up.
the Great Depression in the 1930s wasn't as big as this. And
The
war is
fall in a
long.
particular year was, but now this is extended.
Yeah, because it's a triple and quadruple day, actually.
So you haven't really felt it in London, though.
Well, that's what I mean is I find everything so bizarre. I do remember the recessions of, for example, the 80s, the 90s, but this, I'm not sort of, is it just...
Well, I mean, businesses are definitely feeling it because banks won't be lending out, and that's why
Yeah,
they
my
won't be
parents said
invented.
that in the 80s it was much worse. They felt it much worse.
Because my dad felt it because toward 2008, there was a period of time when he was about to go and buy this refinery off in Nigeria, and he needed some authorization from the bank to lend him like a couple £1 million to leverage the debt at the same time. But then they wouldn't allow him to go and borrow that amount of money because of the sheer amount of money that was being given.
Okay, yeah. Remember that there is still a debt overhang. Up until 2008, private individuals have borrowed way beyond their means. Right? So we have private debt of over £1 trillion. We also have government debt of over £1 trillion. Right? So there's a lot of debt overhang. One of the more extreme measures, let zombie businesses collapse. That was interesting. Basically, somebody says zombie business is something which is a weak business, and it's only kept alive because the base rate is 0.5%. The cost of borrowing now is very low, and they're borrowing money just to stay alive. And so, what one of the economists said, the bank should actually stop lending them money, let them collapse, so that all of that, the resources they're using, can be used by more efficient funds. So that's quite radical. There are 50,000 zombie funds in the country, so that's what they're saying. Let these 50,000 businesses just collapse.
Yeah, but if you let them collapse, then like in the long run, there'll be like no small businesses around.
They're saying the efficient small businesses will survive.
Yeah, but it just means that there's less choice.
But confidence, what about the...
What type of businesses are these?
That can be anything. It can be a plumber, it can be a decorator, it can be a restaurant, it can be a small manufacturer, it can be
Okay, so good.
small business.
But
Well, it's more like monopolistic competition.
Okay, big businesses, like I said, they're sitting on huge piles of cash. Should they be encouraged or forced to invest? What do they do? So this one I think you should read. Because there are a number of novel ideas currently doing the round of the Bank of England Treasury for how the UK should break out. Negative interest rates, promising to stoke inflation,
Wait, negative interest rates?
helicopter money, basically money drops.
Yeah.
Negative interest rate would be the Bank of England.
Yeah.
Will pay you to borrow.
No,
Bank of
you
England
pay
banks.
them to buy money from them.
Yeah.
But if you have interest rates, oh yeah, okay.
If it's negative, it's you pay the bank.
So if you save,
Remember when you borrow money,
you pay them.
you pay them.
So if you
But with
save
negative, you borrow money, but yeah.
they pay you so that you borrow money.
Yeah, that's what
the
it
Bank
is.
of England
Yeah.
is less
Because
negative
usually when you
interest
borrow,
rates
you
lent
pay
to
back a
banks.
percentage.
I understand. This is between the Bank of England and the commercial bank.
Yeah, so between the Bank of England and banks. So they will pay the banks to lend money from the bank.
No, the bank will pay them to borrow money.
Commercial banks will
Yeah.
pay the Bank of England to borrow money. But as far as we're concerned,
So then
they
what?
will charge us.
Isn't that the same as positive interest rates? Because you pay money to borrow money off a bank anyway, so that's interest rates.
So I'm pretty sure it's the person borrowing money gets money.
That's what I'm
For
saying. So it's the
borrowing.
Bank of England giving money to the commercial banks to get money.
Yeah,
So that's what negative interest rates.
agreed.
We should go on Wikipedia, sir.
So these are the promising to stoke inflation. In other words, let inflation go up a little bit, and we can live with it. Helicopter money means parachute drops of money where it's needed, maybe to small businesses. So, have a look at that. See what these ideas are.
What does
What's
Jubilee
helicopter money again?
mean? That
Debt duty means write us some debt. Now, let's have a celebration
yeah.
by writing off debt.
Mhm.
Old school public works scheme. Old school public works. I would suppose.
Isn't public works like people that don't have jobs, they just have to work?
I'm not sure.
On
I
like
don't
the
know
streets.
what
I-
old
I-
school.
I don't
Maybe
really
in an
know.
old and I don't know what public works would mean. Maybe something in the
Old school.
1950s.
Which it leaks out.
Maybe when you were around, there was some sort of different kind of scheme that's happening for construction workers or something.
Okay, a bit more quantitative easing.
Fuck your Red Bull. Fuck life on this one. Fuck this one.
All right, here's your negative rates. Negative rates would mean that the high street banks end up paying the Bank of England to look after their spare cash.
Sure, yeah.
That's what negative is. If the high street bank gives the Bank of England £100, they will give them back in effect 97. Right?
So it's a savings, really.
As opposed to more than 100, they give them less than 100 back. That's essentially it. The reason, by the way, that is what the Bank of England, again, monetary economics is taken out. Every bank has what's called a reserve ratio. Right? And that reserve ratio means that they cannot lend out all of their deposits. So typically the reserve ratio may be 5%. So all of the deposits a bank has, it has to keep 5% in cash terms, and they can deposit that with the Bank of England. Right? And if we want to withdraw our money, that's where the banks will give the money from. Right? I think I'll give you this in this. Right? So how does a bank work by only keeping 5% of all their deposits? How do they keep functioning? Is that they rely on everybody not withdrawing at the same time. That's what bank is based on. Right? So let's say all 5 of us deposited money with a bank.
£100.
They will only keep 100. Let's say we all put £100 in. The bank keeps £50 and they lend out 450. What they're banking, what they're hoping is that all of us do not go to the bank and withdraw straight away. Now let's say if Adobe goes to the bank and says, I want to take out £20. That's fine because they've got £20 to give in. Captain says, I want to take out 10. They'll give you 10 because they've got 50, they hold it. What they don't want is for all of us to go and say, we want our money back, especially a £100 deposit. Right? So that negative will be the amount of money the commercial banks have to hold with the Bank of England. That's essentially it.
But then they'll pass on to us.
Yeah.
That's what
So
it's saying.
That's what it says. They would pass that cost. So in the real world, banks' computer system may not simply be set up to start charging interest where previously they paid it. Okay. Psychological effect is savers do start getting charged interest and they simply withdraw their money.
All right, so the negative interest is on the banks to pay them, but then at the end of the day we still suffer because...
We're going to suffer, but I think it's essentially, the government, because they borrowed so much money,
they need to get their money back into
there's something weird that this is.
So what about?
So they're going to be getting more money in the Bank of England. That's the whole objective of negative interest rates. Instead of paying out more money.
That's what I mean. They're looking after themselves at the expense of
us.
So you know
that's why it's radical because no
fucking
one's
hell,
okay, go on, man.
So you know when Northern Rock crashed, and everyone went to the bank to try and get their money out. What do they do when they ran out of money?
That's it. They close the door and say get lost.
Really? So what whammed all those people's money?
Yeah.
They didn't have any.
So who just lost all their money?
They lost it. And so the central government has to say we'll guarantee depositors up to £50,000.
That's it. What if they have like £100,000? And those people are.
Okay, everyone.
Thanks, mate.